The auction gavel struck the wooden block with a sound that echoed through the crowded meeting hall. But Vivian Vaughn refused to flinch as every eye in Snowflake, Arizona turned toward her with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. The year was 1883, and a woman standing her ground was still something of a spectacle in this dusty corner of the Arizona territory. "I believe," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent room, "that $50 for my father's custom saddle is an insult to his craftsmanship and his memory." The auctioneer, a portly man named Harold Bentley, wiped his brow with a handkerchief and sighed dramatically. "Miss Vaughn, we've been through this. Your father's debts must be settled and these items must be sold. Now, do we have any higher bids for this admittedly fine saddle?" Vivian's green eyes flashed dangerously. She stood ramrod straight in her simple blue dress, her chestnut hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck. At 22, she had already endured more hardship than most twice her age. The death of her father 3 months prior had left her alone with a mountain of debt and a small saddlery shop that was barely staying afloat. From the back of the room, a tall figure shifted in the shadows. Luke Whitaker had been watching the proceedings with quiet interest since they began. New to Snowflake, he'd arrived just a week earlier looking for work and had found it at the Henderson Ranch outside of town. At 30 years old, Luke had seen his fair share of the West from Texas to Montana, but something about this town and now, something about this woman had caught his attention. $60, came a voice from near the door. Jasper Holloway, the owner of the general store, raised his hand. 70, countered Vivian immediately. Harold Bentley threw up his hands. "Miss Vaughn, you cannot bid on your own father's possessions when they're being auctioned to pay his debts." "I most certainly can if I have the money," Vivian retorted, pulling a small pouch from her pocket. "Which I do." "This is most irregular," Bentley protested, his face reddening. "And frankly, Miss Vaughn, your difficult behavior is making this whole process unnecessarily complicated." A deep voice cut through the murmurs that had begun to ripple through the crowd. "I believe the lady has a right to bid on her father's belongings if she has the means." All heads turned toward Luke Whitaker as he stepped forward, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the wooden floor. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the collar of his simple shirt, and his face was tanned from years under the sun. But it was his eyes, a clear, steady blue, that commanded attention. "And who might you be, sir?" Bentley asked, squinting at the newcomer. "Luke Whitaker. I work for James Henderson." He tipped his hat slightly. "Just arrived in town, but even I know that an auction is open to all bidders with cash in hand." Bentley frowned. "Mr. Whitaker, you don't understand. Miss Vaughn has been difficult throughout this entire process. Her father left significant debts, and the bank has been more than patient." Luke's gaze shifted to Vivian, who stood with her chin raised defiantly despite the whispers around her. "Difficult." Luke's mouth quirked up at one corner. "Seems to me difficult just means she knows her worth." "And her father's, by the sound of it." A flush spread across Vivian's cheeks, but she didn't look away from his steady gaze. For a moment, it seemed as if they were the only two people in the crowded room. Bentley cleared his throat. "Be that as it may, we have a $70 bid from Miss Vaughn." "Do I hear 80? Jasper Holloway shook his head, stepping back. "Too rich for my blood for a used saddle. Going once, going twice. Sold to Miss Vaughn for $70. Bentley's gavel struck again, and Vivian stepped forward to place the coins on the table before claiming her father's masterpiece. As the auction continued with smaller items from Edward Vaughn's estate, Luke found himself watching Vivian more than the proceedings. There was something about her, a fierce determination in the set of her shoulders, A flash of vulnerability quickly masked when a cherished item went to a stranger for far less than its true value. When the auction finally concluded 2 hours later, Vivian had managed to retain several pieces of her father's work and personal effects, though many had gone to others. She stood near the doorway, carefully wrapping a tooled leather belt in brown paper, her expression composed but her eyes suspiciously bright. Luke approached her slowly, giving her plenty of time to see him coming. "Miss Vaughn." She looked up, wariness immediately replacing the momentary softness in her expression. "Mr. Whitaker, is it? I suppose I should thank you for your intervention, though I was managing just fine on my own." A smile tugged at his lips. "I don't doubt that for a second. I just believe in fair play, that's all." "Fair play is a luxury in Snowflake," she replied, tying string around her package with perhaps more force than necessary. "Especially for a woman trying to run a business alone. Your father's saddlery, I passed by it yesterday." Fine craftsmanship in the window. Pride flickered across her face. "The best in 3 counties, or it was." Her expression clouded. "Now I'm not sure if I'll be able to keep the shop open at all." "What's the trouble, if you don't mind my asking?" Vivian hesitated, then sighed. "My father's heart gave out before he could complete several important orders. The bank is calling in his loans, and without the income from those sales." She shook her head. "I can stitch and do basic work, but the more intricate carving and stamping his specialties, those skills take years to master." Luke nodded thoughtfully. "I've done some leatherwork in my time. Nothing as fine as what I saw in your shop window, but I know my way around tools." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you offering assistance, Mr. Whitaker? Because I'm not looking for charity." He held up his hands. "Not charity. I'm between permanent situations at the moment. The ranch work is temporary. I might be interested in learning more about fine saddlery if there were someone willing to teach the basics." Vivian studied him for a long moment. "I close the shop at 6. If you're serious, come by tomorrow after that and we can discuss it further." She gathered her packages. "But I warn you, Mr. Whitaker, I'm a demanding teacher." Luke's smile widened. "I'd expect nothing less from someone who knows her worth." A hint of amusement touched her lips before she nodded curtly and swept past him, her skirts rustling against the wooden floorboards. As Luke watched her leave, Sheriff Thomas Miller appeared at his elbow. "I'd be careful there, Whitaker. Vivian Vaughn may be the prettiest face in Snowflake, but she's got a spine of steel and a temper to match." Luke chuckled. "Is that supposed to discourage me, Sheriff?" Miller shook his head. "Just friendly advice. Edward Vaughn was well respected, but he wasn't much of a businessman. Left that girl with a heap of troubles. Most men in town have tried to court her at some point, offering marriage as a solution to her problems. Let me guess, she didn't take kindly to that approach. Last fellow who suggested it too forcefully found himself with a saddle all pointed at a delicate area." The sheriff grinned. "Like I said, spine of steel." Luke's gaze drifted to the doorway where Vivian had disappeared. Good for her. The following evening, the setting sun cast long shadows across Snowflake's main street as Luke approached Vaughn's saddlery. The modest shop sat between the dressmakers and the hardware store, its large front window displaying several examples of fine leatherwork. A small closed sign hung in the glass door, but a light burned inside. He knocked firmly, and moments later Vivian appeared, unlocking the door. She had changed from her auction attire into a simple work dress with sleeves rolled to the elbows, and her hair was secured in a practical braid down her back. "You came," she said, sounding faintly surprised as she stepped aside to let him enter. "I said I would." Luke removed his hat as he stepped inside, breathing in the rich scent of leather and oils that permeated the shop. "This is a fine establishment." Vivian locked the door behind him and moved toward the back workroom. It was my father's pride and joy. He apprenticed in St. Louis before heading west. Opened this shop 25 years ago, before Snowflake was much more than a few buildings and a lot of hope. The workroom was organized, but clearly the domain of someone who had spent decades perfecting their craft. Tools hung in precise order on the walls, and a large work table dominated the center of the space, currently occupied by a partially completed saddle. "This is one of the commissions?" Luke asked, gesturing to the saddle. Vivian nodded, running her fingers over the smooth leather. "For James Henderson, actually. Your employer. It was to be a gift for his son's 21st birthday next month. Father had just begun the decorative tooling when—" Her voice faltered slightly before she squared her shoulders. "Well, it sits unfinished, and I'm afraid my skills aren't equal to the pattern he designed." Luke moved closer to examine the saddle. The basic form was complete, and the leather was of exceptional quality. A design had been sketched onto the surface in pencil, an intricate pattern of oak leaves and acorns that would require significant skill to execute. "This is ambitious work," he said quietly. "How many unfinished pieces did your father leave?" "3 major saddles, including this one. Several smaller items as well. Together, they represent almost 6 months of income." She gestured to a ledger open on a smaller desk. "And as you can see, the bank loan payments require at least some of that money." Luke studied her face. "You're in a difficult spot." "I'm aware," she replied dryly. "Now, you mentioned you have some experience with leatherwork." He nodded. "I worked for a harness maker in Texas for 2 years when I was younger. Did repairs on the trail drives after that. I'm no artist, but I know the basics." "Show me," Vivian said, pointing to a scrap piece of leather and a basic tooling set on the workbench. For the next 20 minutes, Luke demonstrated what he knew, working the leather with practiced hands. His technique wasn't refined, but his hands were steady and his understanding of the material was evident. Vivian watched intently, occasionally asking questions or suggesting a different approach. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "You have good instincts. With some guidance, you might be able to help with the simpler pieces." She hesitated. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Whitaker?" "Luke, please." He set down the tools carefully. "I propose a temporary arrangement. I'll help you complete enough of these orders to satisfy the bank and keep your shop in exchange for room, board, and whatever you think is fair payment for my labor." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "And why would you do this? You already have work at the Henderson Ranch." "Seasonal work that ends in a few weeks, and I've been looking to settle somewhere, learn a trade that might keep me in one place for a while." He smiled slightly. "I've had my fill of drifting. Most cowboys don't give up the trail so easily. I'm not most cowboys." His expression grew more serious. "And I respect what you're trying to do here, Miss Vaughn. Keeping your father's legacy alive takes courage." She studied him for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she nodded. "Very well. A trial period, 2 weeks. If it works out, we can discuss a longer arrangement. And room and board. There's a small apartment above the shop. It's basic but clean." She hesitated. "I live in my father's house 2 streets over. For propriety's sake, that arrangement would be best." Luke nodded. "Agreed. When do I start?" "Tomorrow morning. 6 o'clock. We open at 7, but I'll need to show you more of the basics before customers arrive." She extended her hand formally. "Do we have an agreement, Mr. Whitaker?" He took her hand, noting the calluses that marked her as no stranger to hard work. "We do, Miss Vaughn, and please call me Luke." A hint of a smile touched her lips. "Vivian, then, but only within the shop. In public, propriety must be maintained." "Of course." He released her hand. "I look forward to our partnership, Vivian." As Luke left the shop a few minutes later, he couldn't help but feel he had just made a decision that would change the course of his life. What he couldn't know was just how right he was, or how complicated things would soon become in the small town of Snowflake. The next morning arrived with the soft golden light of an Arizona autumn. Luke was already at the workbench when Vivian entered the shop, his sleeves rolled up, and his attention focused on a simple leather bracelet he was practicing on. "You're early," she observed, hanging her shawl on a peg by the door. He looked up with a smile. "Figured I should get a head start. Ranch work has me used to rising before the sun." Vivian nodded approvingly and moved to the workbench. For the next hour, she showed him the basics of the more detailed tooling techniques her father had been known for. Luke proved to be a quick study, his hands steady and his attention to detail impressive. "You have a natural eye for this," she admitted as they prepared to open the shop. "But the real test will be customer interactions. Many of our clients have been coming here for years. They expect a certain level of expertise and service." "I'll follow your lead," Luke assured her. The morning brought a steady stream of customers, ranchers needing repairs to tack, a young man purchasing his first real belt, ladies examining the finer goods like purses and gloves. Luke observed Vivian's interactions carefully, noting her perfect balance of professional courtesy and genuine knowledge of her products. By midday, he had handled several simple transactions himself, earning an approving nod from Vivian. During a quiet moment, as they ate a simple lunch of bread and cheese in the back room, she studied him thoughtfully. "You're not what I expected, Luke Whitaker." He raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect? Most cowboys I've met are all swagger and stories. You listen more than you talk." "My father always said a man learns nothing while his mouth is moving." Luke smiled slightly. "Besides, I find people interesting, especially people who surprise me. And do I surprise you?" There was a challenge in her voice. "Every hour I spend here." His blue eyes met hers directly. "Most women in your position would have sold the shop and found an easier path." Vivian's expression hardened slightly. "You mean marriage?" "I meant teaching school or working as a shop girl, but yes, marriage would be the expected route." He tilted his head. "I take it you've had offers." She gave a short laugh. "Every eligible bachelor in Snowflake appeared at my door within 2 weeks of my father's funeral, offers of assistance turning quickly to offers of matrimony once they realized the shop's potential value." Her lips curved in a humorless smile. "Their concern for my welfare disappeared just as quickly when they realized I had no intention of being anyone's convenient business acquisition." Luke's expression darkened. "That's not right. That's life for a woman with property but without protection." She brushed crumbs from her skirt. "In any case, I'm managing just fine." "With a little help," he reminded her, his good humor returning. Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment her guard lowered enough for him to glimpse the weight she carried. "Yes, well, we'll see how the next 2 weeks go, won't we?" The bell over the shop door jingled, and Vivian rose smoothly to greet the customer. Luke watched her go, struck by the grace with which she carried herself despite the burden of responsibility that had been thrust upon her. There was a story there more than the simple tale of a daughter trying to preserve her father's legacy. And despite his better judgment, Luke found himself increasingly determined to uncover it. The days fell into a rhythm as October deepened toward winter. Luke proved himself invaluable in the shop, his skills improving rapidly under Vivian's tutelage. His presence allowed her to focus on the more intricate work while he handled repairs, basic sales, and increasingly complex tooling projects. They worked well together, their conversations flowing more easily as time passed. Luke learned that Vivian had lost her mother to influenza when she was just 16, leaving her and her father to comfort each other through grief. She had been her father's assistant in the shop since childhood, absorbing knowledge but never expecting to run the business alone. "He taught me everything he could," she explained one evening as they worked side by side on Henderson's saddle, which was finally nearing completion. "But some techniques take years to master, and he always assumed I would marry eventually, that the shop would pass to a son-in-law with an interest in the craft. But no suitor met your standards," Luke guessed, carefully working on a section of the decorative border. Vivian's hands stilled on her work. "It wasn't that. I was engaged once 3 years ago, Thomas Harrington. He was a lawyer from Phoenix passing through on business." A shadow crossed her face. "He was charming, educated. My father approved. We were to be married in the spring." Luke waited, sensing there was more to the story. "He died," she said simply. "Stagecoach accident on his return to Phoenix. After that, well, I threw myself into learning the business, and then father's heart began to trouble him." "I'm sorry," Luke said quietly. She nodded once sharply before returning to her work. "Life continues. We adapt." Luke wanted to say more but recognized her need to move past the painful memory. Instead, he redirected the conversation. "This saddle is coming along beautifully. Your father would be proud." A genuine smile softened her features. "He would, wouldn't he? James Henderson will be pleased. His son Bradley has wanted one of father's special pieces for years." "Bradley Henderson," Luke's tone changed slightly. "I've met him at the ranch. Seemed entitled." Vivian's expression grew guarded. "He can be difficult. His father built that ranch from nothing, but Bradley was born into prosperity. It shapes a person." "You speak from experience." She gave him a measured look. "Bradley courted me briefly before Thomas came to town. He did not take rejection gracefully." Luke's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I see. It's ancient history," Vivian said dismissively. "But perhaps it would be better if I handle the delivery of this saddle when it's completed." "As you wish," Luke replied, though something in his tone suggested he had more thoughts on the matter. The bell jingled from the front of the shop, and Vivian rose to attend to the late customer. Luke remained at the workbench, his mind turning over this new information about Bradley Henderson. The young rancher had a reputation among the hands for his quick temper and quicker fists, especially when drinking. Luke had kept his distance during his short employment there, but now he found himself wondering if Henderson's resentment toward Vivian might present problems in the future. His thoughts were interrupted by raised voices from the front of the shop. Setting down his tools, Luke moved quickly toward the doorway. Vivian stood behind the counter, her posture rigid as she faced a well-dressed man in his 30s, his handsome features marred by a contemptuous expression. "Perfectly reasonable offer, Vivian," the man was saying. "Your father's debts won't disappear on their own, and Winters is growing impatient." "Mr. Winters has received his interest payments on time, Maxwell," Vivian replied coldly, "and the bank has no cause for complaint. Now, unless you're here to purchase something, I must ask you to leave. We're closing shortly." Maxwell Blackwell, the bank manager's son and junior partner, leaned closer across the counter. "Be sensible. Your father was a craftsman, not a businessman. This shop is too much for a woman to manage alone. My offer to buy the business and inventory at a fair price still stands." Luke stepped into the room, deliberately making his boots sound on the wooden floor. "Is there a problem here?" Blackwell straightened, taking in Luke's tall form with obvious displeasure. "This is a private business discussion." "It's after hours," Luke replied evenly, moving to stand beside Vivian. "And Miss Vaughn has asked you to leave." "And who exactly are you?" Blackwell demanded. "Luke Whitaker." "I work here now." Blackwell's eyebrows rose as he looked between them. "I see. Taking on charity cases, Vivian. I didn't realize your financial situation was stable enough for employees. Vivian's cheeks flushed with anger. My financial situation is none of your concern, Maxwell. And Mr. Whitaker is a skilled craftsman who is helping me complete my father's outstanding orders. How convenient for you both. Blackwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. Well, don't get too comfortable, Cowboy. Miss Vaughn has until the 1st of December to meet the terms of her loan, or this shop and everything in it becomes bank property. He reached for his hat. My offer remains open, Vivian. Think about it carefully. After he left, Luke turned to Vivian. 1st of December. That's less than 6 weeks away. She moved to lock the door, her hands trembling slightly with suppressed anger. Yes, Father took out a loan last year to expand the business. The terms were reasonable when we had 2 skilled pairs of hands working and orders flowing. Now, how much? Luke asked quietly. Vivian hesitated, then sighed. $300, plus 50 in interest. Luke whistled softly. That's a substantial sum. If we complete all the outstanding orders, we'll have it, barely. She ran a hand over her face. But only if we work night and day, and only if no additional expenses arise. Then we'll work night and day, Luke said simply. Starting now. I can get another hour or 2 in this evening on the tooling for Henderson's saddle. Vivian studied him with an unreadable expression. Why are you doing this, Luke? You barely know me or this town. You could find easier work elsewhere. He held her gaze steadily. Maybe I like a challenge, or maybe I respect someone who fights for what's theirs instead of taking the easy way out. He smiled slightly. Besides, I'm learning a valuable trade from a demanding but excellent teacher. A reluctant smile touched her lips. Flattery will get you nowhere, Mr. Whitaker. It's not flattery if it's true, Miss Vaughn. He gestured toward the workroom. Now, shall we get back to it? That saddle won't finish itself. As they returned to their work, Vivian found herself wondering about the enigmatic cowboy who had walked into her shop and her life. Luke Whitaker was unlike anyone she had ever met, steady, perceptive, and unfailingly supportive without being condescending. Despite her best efforts to maintain professional distance, she found herself increasingly aware of his presence, of the quiet strength he radiated and the gentle humor that occasionally broke through his serious demeanor. Such thoughts were dangerous, she reminded herself firmly. She had a business to save and a reputation to maintain. Romance was a luxury she couldn't afford, especially with a man whose past remained largely a mystery and whose future in Snowflake was far from certain. Yet as the evening deepened and they worked side by side in the golden lamplight, Vivian couldn't help but wonder what it might be like to have such a partnership permanently in business and perhaps in life. The thought both thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. November arrived with a biting chill in the air and increasing pressure from the bank. Luke had settled into life in Snowflake, becoming a familiar figure in the saddlery shop. Most townspeople had accepted his presence with minimal gossip, largely due to Sheriff Miller's quiet endorsement and the visible improvements in the shop's productivity. Luke and Vivian had fallen into an efficient routine, working from sunrise to well past sunset most days. Under her guidance, his skills had improved dramatically, allowing him to take on increasingly complex work. Together, they had completed 2 of the 3 major saddle commissions and numerous smaller projects. One crisp morning, as the first hint of dawn colored the sky, Luke descended from his small apartment above the shop to find Vivian already at work, her face drawn with exhaustion. "Did you go home at all last night?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. She looked up, blinking as if coming back from far away. "I wanted to finish the Martinez bridal. It's ready for pickup today. Luke frowned, noting the shadows beneath her eyes. You can't keep pushing yourself like this. You'll make yourself ill. I don't have the luxury of rest, she replied sharply, then sighed. I'm sorry, that was unwarranted. It was honest, Luke corrected, moving to stoke the small stove that provided heat for the shop. But you're not alone in this anymore, Vivian. You need to trust me to carry my share. She set down her tools and rubbed her temples. I do trust you, more than I expected to, truthfully. It's just old habits. Father and I, we only had each other to rely on for so long. Luke poured coffee from the pot he'd prepared and handed her a cup. Tell me about him. Edward Vaughn must have been quite a man to raise a daughter like you. A genuine smile warmed her features. He was strong, principled, but gentle too. He taught me that true strength lies in how you treat those who can't fight back. She took a sip of coffee. He would have liked you, I think. High praise indeed, Luke said softly. I'm honored. Their eyes met over their coffee cups, and something shifted in the air between them, a recognition of feelings that had been growing steadily since Luke's arrival. For a moment, neither spoke, caught in the quiet intensity of the moment. The spell broke when the shop door opened, despite the closed sign still being displayed. Bradley Henderson strode in without knocking, his expensive coat and polished boots marking him as the son of Snowflake's wealthiest rancher. Vivian. Beautiful as ever, he announced, ignoring Luke completely. I've come to check on my birthday present. Father says it's nearly complete. Vivian straightened, her professional demeanor sliding into place. Good morning, Bradley. Yes, your saddle is coming along well. We expect to deliver it next week as promised. Bradley's gaze flickered to Luke, recognition dawning. Whitaker, the hand father hired in September, his brow furrowed. I thought you were working the ranch. Mr. Whitaker has been assisting me since your father reduced his ranch staff for the winter, Vivian explained smoothly. He's proven quite skilled with leather work. Bradley's expression darkened. I see. Well, I hope you're ensuring my saddle receives the master's touch, not a cowboy's crude attempts. Luke's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice even. Miss Vaughn supervises all the work that leaves this shop, Mr. Henderson. Your saddle is receiving the same quality craftsmanship your father has always expected from Vaughn's. I should hope so, given what he's paying. Bradley turned back to Vivian with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Perhaps you'd show me the progress, privately. That won't be necessary, Vivian replied coolly. The saddle is in a critical stage of the tooling process and shouldn't be disturbed. Your father will be notified when it's ready for delivery. Bradley's smile faltered. You're as stubborn as ever, Vivian. It's why I've always admired you. He leaned closer. You know, my offer still stands. A woman of your qualities shouldn't be wasting away in a shop. As my wife, thank you, but no, Vivian interrupted firmly. As I've told you before, I'm not interested in marriage at present. My focus is on preserving my father's business. Bradley's face hardened. Pride won't keep you warm at night, Vivian, nor will it save this shop when Blackwell forecloses. He straightened his coat. I'll expect that saddle delivered on time. Good day. After he departed, Luke let out a slow breath. Charming fellow. Vivian's hands trembled slightly as she set down her coffee cup. Bradley Henderson has never taken rejection well. Unfortunately, he's also the son of our most important customer. Has he always been so? Persistent, since we were 16, Vivian admitted. He proposed the first time when I was 18, again after my father's first heart episode, and once more after my fiancée died. Her expression hardened, each time with the implication that my circumstances made his offer especially generous. Luke's expression darkened. Some men mistake vulnerability for opportunity. Most men, Vivian corrected, then glanced at him. Though perhaps not all. A charged silence fell between them, broken only when the shop bell rang again, signaling their first legitimate customer of the day. Vivian moved to attend to business, but the moment had left its mark. Something had changed between them, a recognition of mutual respect that was deepening into something more complex. As November progressed, Luke and Vivian worked with single-minded determination. The Henderson saddle was completed and delivered by Vivian alone, at Luke's reluctant agreement, along with the final major commission. Smaller projects continued to flow in, and Luke had begun taking on custom work of his own, developing a modest reputation for his belt and holster craftsmanship. With each passing day, their partnership deepened. Luke found himself sharing more of his childhood on a small Texas farm, the loss of his parents to fever when he was 18, his years drifting from job to job across the Western Territories. Vivian, in turn, gradually revealed more of herself, her dreams of expanding the shop to include fine ladies' accessories, her secret love of dime novels, her fear of thunderstorms. These quiet exchanges, often shared over late-night work sessions or early morning coffee, wove a connection between them that grew increasingly difficult to deny. Yet both carefully maintained the boundaries of propriety, aware of the town's watchful eyes and their own vulnerable positions. The loan deadline loomed ever closer. By the last week of November, they had accumulated most of the necessary funds, but still remained $50 short of the required amount. Every day, Maxwell Blackwell found reason to pass by the shop, his smug smile a reminder of what hung in the balance. "We need another commission," Vivian said one evening as they reviewed the accounts. "Something substantial enough to make up the difference." Luke rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "What about a display piece? Something to showcase at the Thanksgiving social this weekend. Might attract interest from some of the wealthier ranchers." Vivian's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant. Father always said holiday gatherings were the best opportunity to find new customers." Her enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "But what could we create quickly enough?" Luke hesitated, then reached for a folded paper in his pocket. "I've been working on a design for a lady's saddle, but with decorative elements that could be adapted for purses and other accessories." He spread the drawing on the table, revealing an intricate pattern of desert wildflowers and vines. Vivian stared at it in amazement. "Luke, this is extraordinary. When did you draw this?" He shrugged, a hint of color touching his cheeks. "Been working on it evenings after you leave." "Just an idea I had." Vivian traced the design with her fingertip. "It's beautiful and absolutely perfect for what we need." She looked up at him, her eyes bright. "We could create a small display saddle along with matching accessories. A complete set would command a premium price." "We'd need to work around the clock to finish it by Saturday," Luke warned. Vivian's smile was determined. "Then that's what we'll do." For the next 3 days, they barely left the shop. Luke focused on the saddle itself, a small, elegant lady's side saddle, while Vivian created matching gloves, a reticule, and a decorative belt. They worked in companionable silence punctuated by brief consultations, shared meals, and occasional moments of laughter when exhaustion made them punchy. By Saturday morning, the set was complete, a masterpiece of collaborative craftsmanship that showcased both Vivian's refined techniques and Luke's natural artistic talent. They stood back to admire their work as the morning light streamed through the shop windows. "It's the finest piece this shop has produced in years," Vivian said softly. "Father would be so proud." Luke studied her profile, taking in the pride in her expression and the way the sunlight caught the auburn highlights in her hair. "He'd be proud of you, Vivian, of your determination, your courage." She turned to face him, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. I couldn't have done this without you, Luke. Whatever happens at the social tonight, I want you to know that. Nothing's going to happen, except that some wealthy rancher's wife is going to fall in love with this set and insist her husband pay whatever price we ask. Luke replied with a confidence he only partly felt. We're going to save your shop, Vivian. Impulsively, she reached out and squeezed his hand. Our shop, at least for now. The touch of her hand sent warmth coursing through him, and for a moment, Luke was tempted to pull her closer, to finally acknowledge the feelings that had been building between them for weeks. But the moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Sheriff Miller stood outside, his expression grave. Morning, Vivian, Luke. Sorry to bother you, but there's been some trouble out at the Henderson place. James took a bad fall from his horse yesterday. Doc Simmons says it doesn't look good. Vivian's hand flew to her mouth. Oh no, poor James. He's been a friend to this shop for years. He's asking for you, Vivian, Miller continued. Says he has business to discuss that can't wait. Bradley's out of his mind with worry, barely left his father's side. Vivian glanced at their display pieces, then at the clock. The social's not until 7, if I go now. I'll finish setting up and transport everything to the town hall, Luke assured her. Go, James Henderson has been good to you and your father. She nodded gratefully. I'll be back as soon as I can. After a quick change into her best day dress, Vivian departed with the sheriff, leaving Luke to complete the preparations for the evening's crucial display. As he carefully wrapped the items for transport, he couldn't shake a feeling of unease. Something about the timing of Henderson's accident and the upcoming loan deadline nagged at him, though he couldn't pinpoint why. Pushing the thought aside, Luke focused on the task at hand. Tonight would determine the fate of Vaughn's saddlery and perhaps his own future in Snowflake as well. The Henderson ranch house was unusually quiet when Vivian arrived. A housemaid led her to James Henderson's bedroom, where the rancher lay pale against his pillows, his normally robust frame diminished by illness and injury. Vivian, my dear, he said weakly as she entered. Thank you for coming. Of course, Mr. Henderson. I'm so sorry about your accident. She approached the bedside, noting with concern the gray cast to his skin. Bradley sat in a chair nearby, his expression a mixture of worry and something else Vivian couldn't quite define. He nodded curtly at her arrival but remained silent. Please sit, James gestured to a chair on the opposite side of the bed. I need to discuss something important with you. Vivian sat, her hands folded in her lap. How can I help? James coughed, then continued. Your father was one of my oldest friends in the territory. Did you know that? Yes, sir. He spoke of you often. When Edward passed, I promised myself I'd look out for you. His eyes, though pained, were clear and direct. I understand from my son that you're having financial difficulties with the shop. Bradley shifted in his seat, his gaze now fixed intently on Vivian. We've had challenges, Vivian acknowledged carefully, but we've nearly resolved them. James questioned. Luke Whitaker has been assisting me in the shop. He's become an excellent leather worker. James nodded slowly. The quiet fellow who worked our north pasture this fall, I remember him, seemed a decent sort. He glanced at his son, then back to Vivian. Bradley tells me the bank is foreclosing on Monday if you can't meet your loan payment. Vivian tensed. We're very close to the full amount. In fact, we've created a special display for the Thanksgiving social tonight that should attract enough interest to cover the remaining balance. James closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. Vivian, I'd like to settle Edward's debt. Consider it repayment for years of friendship and exceptional craftsmanship. Shock rendered Vivian momentarily speechless. Mr. Henderson, that's incredibly generous, but Father, Bradley interrupted, leaning forward. We discussed this. Given your condition, Now isn't the time for financial gestures, no matter how well-intentioned. James waved a hand dismissively. My condition is precisely why I need to settle old debts, son. He turned back to Vivian. I insist. Bradley will arrange for the payment to be delivered to the bank on Monday morning. Bradley's face darkened, but he remained silent. Vivian hesitated, torn between pride and practicality. Mr. Henderson, while I appreciate the offer more than I can express, I believe we can manage. My father always taught me to stand on my own. A faint smile touched the old rancher's lips. Stubborn, just like Edward. Very well. Consider it a business proposition then. A 5-year contract for exclusive supply of all leather goods for the Henderson Ranch, with an advance payment of $500. He coughed again, more severely. That should satisfy both your pride and your bank. Bradley stood abruptly. Father, you need rest. Miss Vaughn should be going. Sit down, Bradley, James said firmly, then softened his tone. Son, I know you've had your heart set on Vivian for years, but forcing her hand through financial distress isn't the way to win a woman of her character. Color flooded Bradley's face. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. James turned back to Vivian. My son instructed Maxwell Blackwell to accelerate the terms of your loan, hoping your desperation might lead you to accept his suit. I only discovered this yesterday. Vivian's shock quickly gave way to anger as she looked at Bradley. You deliberately tried to force me into bankruptcy. Bradley's expression hardened. I was trying to save you from your own stubbornness. A woman has no business running a shop alone, especially one drowning in debt. That wasn't your decision to make, Vivian replied, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. Enough, James said wearily. What's done is done. Vivian, do you accept my business proposition? Vivian took a deep breath, bringing her emotions under control. I accept, Mr. Henderson, with profound gratitude, and I promise the Henderson Ranch will receive the finest leatherwork in the territory. James smiled. I never doubted it. He reached for a small bell beside his bed. Bradley will draw up the paperwork immediately and deliver your advance payment. He fixed his son with a stern gaze. Won't you, son? Bradley's jaw worked as he struggled with his anger, but he finally nodded stiffly. Of course, father. Whatever you wish. As Vivian left the Henderson Ranch an hour later, legal agreement and bank draft in hand, her emotions were in turmoil. Relief at the shop's salvation ward with anger at Bradley's manipulation, and concern for James Henderson's failing health. She urged the driver to hurry back to town, eager to share the news with Luke and prepare for the social, which now represented opportunity rather than desperate necessity. By the time Vivian returned to Snowflake, Luke had already transported their display pieces to the town hall and was waiting anxiously outside the shop. Vivian, he hurried to meet her as she stepped down from the wagon. How is Henderson, and why are you smiling like that? She pulled him inside the shop, unable to contain her excitement. James is very ill, I'm afraid, but he's just saved the saddlery. She quickly explained what had transpired, including Bradley's underhanded scheme. Luke's expression darkened at the revelation of Bradley's actions. That explains a few things. I never trusted him. His features softened as he took in Vivian's joy. But this is wonderful news, Vivian. The shop is secure. Our work is secure, she corrected, impulsively grasping his hands. Luke, this contract means stability for years. We can expand the business, just as Father always wanted. If, she hesitated, suddenly uncertain, if you're still interested in a long-term arrangement, that is. Luke's heart quickened at her words and the feel of her hands in his. I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be, or anyone I'd rather work with. Their gazes held, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Vivian was suddenly, acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the warmth of his hands and the intensity in his blue eyes. The moment stretched, teetering on the edge of something momentous, until the town hall clock chimed 6, breaking the spell. "The social," Vivian said, reluctantly stepping back. "We should prepare." Luke nodded, equally reluctant to end the moment. "I'll fetch your father's sleigh while you change." Even with Henderson's contract secured, tonight is still an important opportunity to showcase our work. An hour later, they arrived at the Thanksgiving social, their display pieces arranged prominently on a table near the entrance to the town hall. Vivian wore her finest dress, a deep green velvet that complemented her auburn hair and fair complexion, while Luke cut a handsome figure in a new shirt and vest he'd purchased specifically for the occasion. Their display immediately attracted attention. Ladies gathered around the delicate side saddle and matching accessories, exclaiming over the intricate floral design. Several placed orders for similar items, and one wealthy cattle baron's wife insisted on purchasing the entire display set on the spot for her daughter's upcoming birthday. As the evening progressed, Luke and Vivian moved through the gathering, accepting congratulations on their craftsmanship and, increasingly, on the news of Henderson's contract, which had spread quickly through the small community. Maxwell Blackwell approached them during a lull, his expression sour. "It seems congratulations are in order, Miss Vaughn. Quite the fortuitous turn of events." "Indeed," Vivian replied coolly. "I understand you've been working closely with Bradley Henderson regarding my loan. How dedicated of you." Blackwell had the grace to look discomfited. "Business is business, Miss Vaughn, nothing personal." "Of course not," Luke interjected, his tone pleasant but his eyes hard. "Just as it won't be personal when we transfer all of Vaughn's banking business to the new bank opening in Holbrook next month." Blackwell paled slightly. "There's no need for hasty decisions. The bank has always valued the Vaughn account." "Strange way of showing it," Vivian remarked. "We'll consider our options carefully, Mr. Blackwell. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have customers to attend to." As Blackwell retreated, Vivian turned to Luke with a raised eyebrow. "There's a new bank opening in Holbrook," Luke grinned. "Not that I've heard, but he doesn't need to know that." Vivian laughed, a free and joyous sound that Luke realized he'd rarely heard from her. "Luke Whitaker, you are full of surprises." "Speaking of surprises," he said, suddenly serious, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you. Would you step outside with me for a moment? It's rather warm in here." Intrigued, Vivian allowed him to lead her onto the town hall's small porch, where the crisp November night air provided a refreshing contrast to the crowded interior. Stars spangled the clear sky, and a nearly full moon cast silver light across the quiet street. "What is it?" she asked, noting the sudden tension in his bearing. Luke took a deep breath. "Vivian, these past weeks working with you have been the most fulfilling of my life. I came to Snowflake looking for temporary work and found something I never expected." Her heart began to race as she recognized the direction of his words. "Luke, please, let me finish before I lose my nerve." He took her hands gently in his. "I know your history makes you cautious, and I respect that. I'm not asking for promises or declarations. But I want you to know that my feelings for you have grown far beyond business partnership or friendship." Vivian felt a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the evening's festivities. "My feelings have grown as well," she admitted softly. "But I've been afraid to acknowledge them. After Thomas died, I swore I wouldn't make myself vulnerable again." "I understand fear," Luke said quietly. "I've spent years drifting, never staying anywhere long enough to risk real connection, until now." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "I'm not asking you to risk everything at once, just enough to see where this might lead. at whatever pace feels right for you. Vivian studied his face in the moonlight, this man who had come into her life so unexpectedly and proved himself time and again with his skill, his integrity, his respect for her independence. The man who had called her difficult with admiration rather than criticism. "I think," she said slowly, "that I would like very much to see where this might lead." The smile that lit Luke's face was like sunrise. Slowly, giving her every chance to step away, he leaned forward. Their lips met in a gentle kiss that held both promise and question. Vivian's hands moved to his shoulders as she returned the kiss, answering his unspoken question with quiet certainty. When they parted, Luke rested his forehead against hers. "I should warn you, I'm likely to be just as stubborn a partner in this as I am in the workshop." Vivian laughed softly. "I would expect nothing less." The sound of the town hall door opening prompted them to step slightly apart, though Luke kept one of her hands in his. Sheriff Miller appeared, looking apologetic for the interruption. "Sorry to intrude, but you've got customers asking about custom orders inside, and I figured you wouldn't want to miss the business." His eyes twinkled knowingly. "Though it seems you might be negotiating a different kind of partnership out here." Vivian blushed, but didn't release Luke's hand. "Thank you, Sheriff. We'll be right in." As Miller disappeared back inside, Luke squeezed her hand gently. "Ready to face the curious eyes of Snowflake's finest. By morning, we'll be the subject of every conversation in town." "Let them talk," Vivian replied with newfound confidence. "We have nothing to hide and everything to be proud of." Together, they returned to the social, their clasped hands making a statement that required no words. The evening continued with dancing, more business discussions, and occasional stolen glances that spoke volumes about their changing relationship. As December arrived, Snowflake embraced the holiday season with typical Western enthusiasm. Evergreen boughs decorated storefronts, and planning began for the Christmas festivities. At Vaughn's Saddlery, business flourished under the security of the Henderson contract and the growing reputation of the shop's unique collaborative work. Luke had officially become Vivian's full partner in the business, their complementary skills creating pieces that attracted attention from as far away as Phoenix. Their personal relationship developed with the same careful craftsmanship they applied to their leather goods thoughtfully, with attention to detail, and with growing confidence. For the first time since her father's death, Vivian found herself looking forward rather than backward, making plans for expansion and innovation. Luke's artistic vision combined with her technical expertise had created a new direction for the saddlery, one that honored Edward Vaughn's legacy while forging its own identity. One snowy evening a week before Christmas, after closing the shop, Luke and Vivian sat before the stove, reviewing designs for a new line of ladies' accessories they planned to introduce in the spring. "I've been thinking," Luke said, setting aside his sketching paper. "The apartment above the shop is becoming cramped with all my leatherworking books and materials, and running between your house and the shop every day isn't very efficient." Vivian looked up from her ledger, recognizing the careful casualness in his tone. "What are you suggesting, Mr. Whitaker?" He met her eyes directly. "I'm suggesting, Miss Vaughn, that perhaps it's time to consider a more permanent arrangement, one that would satisfy both practical business concerns and personal considerations." "Are you proposing a merger, Luke?" Vivian asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I am." He moved from his chair to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. "Vivian Vaughn, you are the most remarkable woman I've ever known, stubborn, brilliant, and braver than anyone has a right to be. These past months have shown me what it means to truly build something meaningful in work and in love." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. "I've been saving for this since October." Inside the box lay a ring, a delicate gold band set with a small but perfect diamond. Vivian's breath caught as Luke continued. "I know we haven't known each other long by some standards, but I believe some souls recognize each other immediately, while others take lifetimes. Mine recognized yours the moment you stood up to that auctioneer." His blue eyes were earnest and clear. "I love you, Vivian. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears glistened in Vivian's eyes as she looked at this man who had entered her life so unexpectedly and changed it so completely. "Yes," she whispered, then more firmly, "Yes, I will." Luke's face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. When they finally parted, Vivian laughed softly. "What will people say?" Difficult Vivian Vaughn finally tamed. Luke shook his head. "No one who knows you would ever make that mistake. You're not meant to be tamed, Vivian. Your spirit, your determination, they're what make you extraordinary." He kissed her again, briefly. "Besides, I'd never want to change the woman I fell in love with." "Nor would I change you," she replied warmly. "Though I do expect you to remember to clean your tools properly and stop leaving coffee cups on the work table." Luke laughed. "See, difficult." He pulled her close. "And perfect exactly as you are." They were married on New Year's Day, 1884, in a simple ceremony attended by the entire town. James Henderson, recovered enough to attend with the aid of a walking stick, gave the bride away in place of her father, while Bradley Henderson was conspicuously absent, having departed for an extended business trip to California. Vivian wore a gown of ivory silk with leather accents that she and Luke had designed together, a unique wedding dress for a unique couple. Luke stood tall and proud in a new suit, his usual cowboy attire set aside for the occasion, but his steady nature unchanged. As they exchanged vows in Snowflake's small church, snow fell gently outside, blanketing the town in pristine white. Their words, spoken clearly and with absolute conviction, were a testament to the journey that had brought them together and the path they would now walk side by side. The celebration afterward was lively and warm, with dancing, feasting, and countless toasts to the newlyweds. Even Maxwell Blackwell attended, offering genuinely good wishes now that the Henderson contract had established Vaughn Saddlery as one of the most secure businesses in town. As evening approached and the festivities continued, Luke drew Vivian away from the crowd for a moment of quiet. "Happy, Mrs. Whitaker?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. Vivian smiled up at him, love shining in her eyes. "Extraordinarily so, Mr. Whitaker." "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when I first heard the auctioneer call you difficult, I knew you were someone special, someone who knew her own worth." "And when you defended me," she replied, "I knew you were someone who might be worth the risk of loving again." Luke kissed her tenderly, then whispered against her lips, "Here's to being difficult together for the rest of our lives." Vivian laughed, the sound clear and joyous in the winter air. "I can't imagine a better future than that." And as they returned to their celebration, hand in hand, they carried with them the certainty that what had begun as a business arrangement had transformed into something far more precious, a partnership of equals, built on respect, admiration, and deepest love. The difficult path that had brought them together now stretched before them as a shared journey, filled with promise and possibility in the town that had become their home. 5 years later, on a bright spring morning in 1889, Vaughn and Whitaker Fine Leather Goods stood as a testament to what determination, skill, and partnership could achieve. The original saddlery had expanded to include a second storefront devoted entirely to ladies' accessories and fine custom goods, while the main shop continued to produce the quality saddles and tack that had been Edward Vaughn's legacy. Luke stood in the doorway between the two shops, watching with pride as Vivian demonstrated a leather stamping technique to their apprentice, a bright young woman named Clara who had shown exceptional aptitude for the craft. Their business had grown steadily, attracting acclaim throughout the territory for their unique designs and impeccable craftsmanship. A tug on his pant leg drew Luke's attention downward, where his 3-year-old son, Edward James Whitaker, gazed up with the same determined green eyes as his mother. "Papa, look!" The boy held up a small piece of leather on which he had managed to imprint a wobbly but recognizable star with the children's stamping set Luke had made for him. Luke crouched down, examining the work with exaggerated seriousness. "That's excellent craftsmanship, Eddie. Your grandfather would be proud." The boy beamed. "Can I show Mama?" "Of course, but remember, she's teaching right now. Wait until she's finished with Miss Clara." Eddie nodded solemnly and clutched his treasure carefully as they waited. At the workbench, Vivian glanced up and caught Luke's eye, a smile of shared happiness passing between them. Their life together had blossomed like the desert after rain, sometimes challenging, always rewarding, and increasingly rich with each passing season. The birth of their son had added new dimensions to their partnership, and the expected arrival of their second child in the summer had them both eager to see how their family would grow. As Vivian concluded her lesson, Eddie rushed forward to show her his accomplishment. She bent awkwardly to admire it, her advanced pregnancy making such movements increasingly difficult. "Beautiful work, little man," she praised, ruffling his dark hair affectionately. "You'll be running the shop before we know it." "With Clara," Eddie added seriously, having developed a strong admiration for their teenage apprentice, who laughed and offered him a high five. Luke moved to join his family, placing a gentle hand on Vivian's back. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm carrying a future rodeo champion," she replied with a wry smile. "This one's even more active than Eddie was." "Stubborn already," Luke observed with affection. "Must take after their mother." Vivian arched an eyebrow. "Or their equally stubborn father." Clara gathered her tools, recognizing the familiar banter that often led to moments the young couple preferred to have in private. "I'll finish the Carson order this afternoon, Mrs. Whitaker, and I can watch Eddie if you need to rest." "Thank you, Clara." Vivian smiled gratefully at their apprentice, who had become almost like family over the past 2 years. "But I think a walk might help more than rest right now. Luke, shall we take our lunch to the park?" The spring air was fresh and invigorating as they strolled through Snowflake's center, Eddie running ahead to chase butterflies while Luke kept a watchful eye on him. The town had grown steadily since their wedding, with a proper schoolhouse, a new hotel, and even electric lighting in some of the main businesses. Progress had come to the Arizona territory, though much of the frontier spirit remained. They settled on a bench beneath a cottonwood tree, spreading a simple picnic of bread, cheese, and early strawberries between them. Eddie was soon distracted by other children playing nearby, allowing his parents a rare moment of relative privacy. "I had a letter from James Henderson this morning," Vivian said, accepting a slice of apple from Luke's knife. "He's doing well in California. The drier climate seems to agree with him." Luke nodded. "Good to hear. His business continues to be a blessing for us." "Yes, though Bradley's management of the ranch hasn't been as progressive as his father's. He's still ordering the same designs year after year." "Some men resist change," Luke observed. "Speaking of which, did you see the newspaper? They're planning the first automobile demonstration in Phoenix next month." Vivian laughed. Can you imagine such a contraption on our Snowflake streets? The horses would have fits. Progress marches on, whether we like it or not. Luke's expression grew more thoughtful. I've been thinking about that Eastern inquiry we received. The one from the New York leather goods manufacturer. Vivian stilled, her eyes searching his. You want to accept their offer to purchase our designs, not all of them, but perhaps a limited line with proper credit and royalties. It could mean significant income without affecting our custom work here. He covered her hand with his, and it would secure Eddie's future and this little one's. He gestured to her rounded abdomen. Vivian considered, running her free hand over her belly as the baby shifted within. Father always dreamed of seeing his work recognized beyond Arizona, to have Vaughn designs in New York shops. She smiled softly. He would have been amazed. So you're not opposed? No, not opposed. Cautious, but not opposed. She squeezed his hand. We've built something special, Luke. Something true to ourselves and to Father's legacy. As long as we maintain that integrity, I think expansion makes sense. Luke leaned over to kiss her gently. Have I told you lately how fortunate I am to have married such a wise woman? Not since breakfast, she teased. But I'll accept the compliment. They watched as Eddie played tag with the blacksmith's daughter, his laughter carrying across the park. The years had brought changes to their lives that neither could have imagined that fateful day at the auction. Yet through it all, the foundation they had built together remained solid, a partnership of equals, each supporting the other's strengths and compensating for their weaknesses. Do you ever wonder, Vivian asked softly, what would have happened if you hadn't spoken up that day? If you just let the auctioneer dismiss me as difficult? Luke considered for a moment. I suspect you'd have found your way regardless. Your determination wouldn't have allowed any other outcome. He smiled. But I'm grateful every day that I was there to witness it and to recognize what that auctioneer couldn't see, which was that difficult is just another word for extraordinary. Luke's blue eyes held the same admiration they had shown 5 years earlier. And extraordinary is exactly what you are, Vivian Whitaker. She leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing over her. We're both a little difficult, I think. It's why we work so well together. As the afternoon sun warmed them, their son played nearby, and their unborn child moved beneath Vivian's heart. They shared the comfortable silence of two people who had found in each other not just love, but true partnership in business and in life. The path that had brought them together might have been unexpected, but the journey they continued to share was all the richer for the challenges they had overcome together. In Snowflake, Arizona, the legacy of Edward Vaughn lived on, not just in the fine leather goods that bore his name, but in the love story that had begun with an auctioneer's dismissal and a cowboy's perception. And as Luke and Vivian planned their future together, expanding their business, raising their children, building their life, they did so with the knowledge that what some might call difficult, they recognized as strength, determination, and the uncompromising knowledge of one's true worth.